Seoul, South Korea, record downpours flooded houses, roads, and subway stations.
At least 8 people have died and 7 people have gone missing in floods, landslides, and other incidents. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I'm Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. And now for the headlines. Former President Fidel V. Ramos accorded a state funeral with full military honors at the libingan ng mga bayani. The Philippine economy expands 7.4% in the second quarter of 2022. United Nations Security Council calls for an emergency meeting to discuss recent clashes in Gaza. Former U.S. President Donald Trump accuses FBI agents of prosecutorial misconduct following a raid on his Florida house. And pop artist Olivia Newton-John dies after a 3-decade-long battle with cancer. Former President Fidel V. Ramos was accorded a state funeral with full military honors as his ashes were inurned at the libingan ng mga bayani today. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. was among the government officials who attended the state burial. Eden Santos reports.
Former President Fidel V. Ramos was formally laid to rest in a state funeral at the libingan ng mga bayani. The late president's ashes were inurned and accorded full military honors. From the Heritage Park, the urn carrying Ramos' ashes arrived at the presidential section of the gravesite past 11 a.m. His urn was placed inside a casket, and as the funeral procession took place, rose petals were dropped from a Philippine Air Force chopper. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. handed over the folded Philippine flag to Ramos' widow, former First Lady Amelita Ming Ramos.
The Philippine flag will be handed over to the former First Lady, Madam Amelita Ming Ramos. His Excellency Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. is handing over the Philippine flag.
The former president's favorite song, Maalaala Mo Kaya and Alerta Katipunan, were played by the military band. Mrs. Ramos thanked those who came to her husband's burial and recalled the difficulties of her husband while serving in the military. She added that despite his busy life in the military, Ramos was able to help raise their family.
Alam niyo, hirap ang buhay sa military. Pero kinaya namin. Tumulong si President Ramos, kayang-kaya niya, at he was able to raise 5 daughters, 8 grandsons, and 5 granddaughters. Mahirap mag-adjust. 2 taon nasa bahay siya, 2 taon nasa probinsya. Tapos, nag-volunteer pa siya 2 taon sa Vietnam. Kaya maraming salamat sa tulong niyo. At sabi niya, kaya natin ito. Maraming salamat. Kaya ba natin? Maraming salamat sa inyo lahat.
Prior to becoming the 12th President of the Republic of the Philippines, Ramos was a decorated military officer and a Korean War veteran. As President, his administration was best known for its Philippines 2000 program and was credited for revitalizing the country's economy. Under his watch, a peace treaty was also signed with the Moro National Liberation Front or MNLF of Chairman Nurmi Suari. Ramos died last July 31 at the age of 94. Eden Santos reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The country's economy remains stable amid the challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, rising inflation rate, and high fuel prices. Mian Corvera has the details.
The Philippine economy grew 7.4% in the second quarter of the year. National Statistician Undersecretary Dennis Mapa said the sectors and industries that contributed to the growth include wholesale and retail trade, motorcycle repair, construction, and transportation storage.
Ito ay pang-limang consecutive quarter na paglago ng ekonomiya mula sa ikalawang quarter ng taong 2021. Ang net primary income from the rest of the world ay tumaas din ng 64.8%. Gayon din, ang gross national income ay nagtala ng pagtaas na 9.3% sa ikalawang quarter ng taong 2022.
Socio-Economic Planning Secretary and NEDA Director General Arsenio Balisacan said the economy has achieved the target of 6.5 up to 7.5% growth rate this year. He mentioned the Philippines was the second best performing Asian country next to Vietnam with 7.9%. Balisacan recognized the economic activity spurred by the recently concluded local and national elections. He added that the removal of tourism restrictions, the administration's policy on living with the virus, and intensified vaccination program against COVID-19 had contributed to the economic revitalization. However, the agricultural sector remains low due to natural calamities. Balisacan stressed that the Marcos administration could not make the economy grow overnight, which was why it intensified its effort to provide farming technologies and financial aid to farmers.
You need a robust agricultural sector to continue the improvement in the rest of the economy.
Filipinos admit that their lives have improved a little bit compared to 2 years ago at the height of the pandemic and COVID-19 lockdowns. But they still need to save now that the commodity prices are high.
May improvement naman kesa po sa mga nakaraang taon. May pinagkaiba naman po siya. Sana magpatuloy lang po sana.
Nakakapag-save ka pa naman, sir?
Okay naman po, nakakapag-save pa. Pero sana, bumaba pa yung mga bilihin.
Kasi ano pa lang ng anak ko sa tuition ko, kulang na kulang. Kailangan magtipid po.
NEDA said the administration is doing all it can do to alleviate the public from the effects of high inflation.
The global headwinds, particularly inflation, the imported inflation, particularly those coming from energy, fuel, and food, contributed to that noticeable slowdown. And to the extent that this is expected to continue in the second half, you would likely to face some challenges indeed in sustaining that growth. But as we have mentioned earlier, we have already accommodated, taken into account such development in our revisited projection or target for the rest of the year. So we may not grow as fast in the second half as in the first half, but the growth is likely to be overall growth for the year is still going to be within the 6.5 to 7.5%.
Mian Corvera reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
More cases of Omicron subvariants have been detected in the country. Madeline Villar Moratillo reports.
The Department of Health has reported additional cases of Omicron subvariants. DOH officer in charge, Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergere, said the latest genome sequencing showed 906 new cases of BA.5 subvariant, 814 of whom have recovered, while 49 others are still in isolation. The highly transmissible BA.5 is the most common Omicron subvariant in the country, with a total number of 14,013 logged cases. Additionally, the DOH has detected 11 new cases of BA.4, bringing the country's total to 115 BA.4 cases. Meanwhile, 7 more cases have been added to the 174 cases of BA.2.12.1 subvariant nationwide. The Department of Health is still probing the exposures and travel history of the new cases. Madeline Villar Moratillo reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Another senator has tested positive for COVID-19. Senate President Juan Miguel Zubiri announced at the start of today's session that Senator Cynthia Villar tested for the virus after an RT-PCR test. Zubiri informed the body that the lady senator felt sick Monday night and requested an RT-PCR test. Villar attended yesterday's session and had her photo taken with visitors at the plenary hall. Aside from Villar, Senator Amy Marcos also tested positive for COVID-19 on Monday, while Senator Alan Peter Cayetano was confirmed infected last week. The 3 lawmakers were allowed to attend the hybrid session while in their isolation.
The Department of Health says the global initiative COVAX facility will replace all expiring vaccines procured by the Philippines. The move will include vaccines procured by the private sector and local governments. Health OIC Maria Rosario Vergere says the replacement of jabs will be scheduled, but the country has enough supply for now. Vergere told reporters that they already got the commitment of COVAX for the replacement. According to her, the country's vaccine wastage is less than the 10% threshold set by the World Health Organization. She adds that the health department is open to any probe into the expiring and wasted jabs.
The Department of Health has confirmed that the Janssen vaccine of Johnson & Johnson has applied for a certificate of product registration for COVID-19 before the Food and Drug Administration. Health OIC Maria Rosario Vergere says the FDA is currently evaluating Janssen's application. If its application for CPR is approved, the Janssen COVID-19 vaccine can be used even without emergency use authorization and will be available on the market. Meanwhile, Vergere also clarifies that the FDA has not yet received any application for CPR from AstraZeneca.
The Philippine Department of Foreign Affairs maintains Alert Level 1 in Israel despite the truce reached between Israel and Palestinian militants over the weekend. The DFA also continues to monitor the status of Filipinos in Israel. Moira Encina reports.
Alert Level 1 remains for Filipinos in Israel. The Department of Foreign Affairs says nonetheless that it welcomes the truce in the Gaza Strip and it hopes Egyptian-mediated ceasefire agreement will hold. The DFA also appeals to all parties to respect the ceasefire agreement and to remain calm. No Filipinos were reportedly affected by the clashes. Despite the truce, Filipinos in the Gaza Strip and the neighboring areas are advised to remain in their houses and avoid public places. The DFA also urges them to monitor the security situation in their areas through official communication channels of the embassies. The department ensures that the Philippine embassies in Tel Aviv and Amman will continue to monitor the situation. Last Friday, Israel launched what it called preemptive strikes against suspected attacks of the Islamic Jihad. The militants retaliated by unleashing hundreds of rockets at Israel. In the 3-day clashes, 44 Palestinians were killed and 300 injured. Moira Encina, reporting for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, UN Secretary Council meets over Gaza fighting. Taiwan's foreign minister says China drills are part of its game plan for invasion. And Turkish-flagged ship with Ukrainian grain docks in northern Turkey. These and more stories from around the globe when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Makakasama ang ating mga ka-shoppers. Mabentang usapan, puno ng tawanan, at tsikahan.
Ang dami naming naisip ng mga syupatos, mga pasyuot, parang walang dating.
At makakasama pa natin, mame, si Miss Aubrey Miles.
Yan ba kinakausap mo rin? Di ba ganun yan?
Kinakausap ko na hindi yung seryoson. Kinakausap ko na mabuhay ka. Huwag kang mamatay.
Isa na namang tanghalian na pag-shopping ang pagsasamahan natin dito sa
Shopping All the Way with
Jojo A!
Good news sa lahat ng mahilig magluto at kumain.
May bago at katakam-takam na cooking show dito lamang sa Net25. Ako si Patty Daza.
Ako naman si Sandy Daza.
Samahan niyo kaming magpinsan dito sa Lutong Daza.
Bukod sa masarap at abot kaya na recipes, masarap ang kwentuhan at halakhakan dito.
At syempre, laging may special celebrity guest.
Huwag kalimutan,
Lutong Daza. Dito lamang sa Net25.
This portion is brought to you by 318 Automart, Arlex Trading and Construction Supplies.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. The UN Security Council discusses the situation in Gaza, where a truce is holding between Islamic Jihad militants and Israel after 3 days of deadly conflict. Permanent observer of the State of Palestine to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, says enough is enough.
Are you ready to say enough is enough? As the highest authority responsible for the maintenance of international peace and security? How many more years does it get to impose its inhumane blockade on 2 million people, half of them children, until someone says enough is enough? How many more children do we have to bury until someone says enough is enough?
Ahead of the meeting, Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, calls for the council to place full accountability on Islamic Jihad. Erdan accuses the Iran-backed group of using Gazans as human shields.
There is no room for false narratives. The facts are clear. Mr. President, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad deliberately fired 1,100 rockets at Israeli civilians, with roughly 200 landing inside the Gaza Strip, killing innocent Palestinians and among them young children. This is not an assessment. This is the hard truth, and Israel has all the proof.
Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid warns that anyone who tries to harm Israel will pay with their life, saying the bombardment had landed a devastating blow to the enemy.
מי שינסה לפגוע בנו ישלם בחייו. במהלך כל המבצע נעשה מאמץ מיוחד למנוע פגיעה בבלתי מעורבים. מדינת ישראל לא תתנצל על כך שהיא מגנה על תושביה תוך שימוש בכוח, אבל מותם של חפים מפשע, בעיקר ילדים, הוא שובר.
Lipid warnings come in nearly a day since a truce concluded 3 days of deadly conflict between Israel and Islamic Jihad militants in the Gaza Strip.
מבצע עלות השחר החזיר לישראל את היוזמה, החזיר את ההרתעה הישראלית, כל המטרות הושגו. כל הצמרת הצבאית של הג'יהאד האסלאמי בעזה סוכלה תוך 3 ימים, עוצמתו ותחכומו של צה"ל היכו את האויב מכה קשה.
The Prime Minister also directly addressed the residents of the Gaza Strip, saying there is another way to live and that the choice, the future, lies in the hands of the Gaza people. Lapid also expressed his gratitude to the President of Egypt and the head of the Egyptian General Intelligence for their central and crucial role in reaching a ceasefire and maintaining regional stability. However, he said that if it becomes necessary, Israel will launch a preemptive strike to protect its citizens, sovereignty, and infrastructure.
Taiwan's foreign minister said that Beijing is using air and sea drills encircling the island to prepare for an invasion and to change the status quo in the Asia-Pacific region. Joseph Wu told a press conference in Taipei China has used the drills and its military playbook to prepare for the invasion of Taiwan. He added that China is conducting large-scale military exercises, missile launches, cyber attacks, a disinformation campaign, and economic coercion in order to weaken public morale in Taiwan. Wu called Beijing's war games a gross violation of Taiwan's rights and an attempt to take control of the waters around Taiwan and the wider Asia-Pacific region. He also thanked Taipei's Western allies for standing up to China, saying such an act sends a clear message to the world that democracy will not bow to the intimidation of authoritarianism. Wu's press conference came after the Taiwanese military held its own live-fire drill to simulate defending against an attack on the island. Lu Woijie, spokesman for Taiwan's 8th Army Corps, clarified the drills had been scheduled previously and were not in response to China's exercises.
U.S. President Joe Biden says he is concerned over China's extension of military drills around Taiwan. Biden's remarks come as Beijing said it carried out fresh military exercises in the wake of a visit by U.S. House Secretary Nancy Pelosi.
I'm not worried, but I'm concerned that they're moving as much as they are. But I don't think they're going to do anything more.
Pelosi's visit enraged the Chinese government, which views Taiwan as part of its territory awaiting reunification, if forced by or if necessary. China has deployed fighter jets, warships, and ballistic missiles in what analysts describe as practice for a blockade and ultimate invasion of the island.
The Turkish-flagged Polarnet cargo ship carrying 12,000 tons of corn docks at the port of Derince in northeastern Turkey. It is the first grain shipment from Ukraine to reach its final destination under a deal between Moscow and Kyiv. The deal brokered by Turkey and the United Nations lifts a Russian blockade of Ukraine's ports and sets terms for millions of tons of wheat and other grain to start flowing from silos and ports. Meanwhile, the first ship to leave Ukraine under the deal is now floating in the Mediterranean Sea, searching for a new destination. The Razoni left the port of Odessa on August 1st, carrying 26,000 tons of corn. It was headed toward Lebanon when its cargo was rejected by the final buyer due to a 5-month delay in its delivery.
The United States has announced more military aid for Ukraine. Undersecretary of Defense Colin Kahl says the $1 billion package will give the Ukrainian military a number of much-needed items.
I am. Thank you for...
Munitions for National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, or NASAMS, 1,000 Javelin systems and hundreds of AT-4 anti-armor systems, 50 armored medical treatment vehicles, Claymore anti-personnel munitions, C4 explosives, demolition munitions, and demolition equipment, and medical supplies to include first aid kits, bandages, monitors, and other equipment.
I am. Thank you.
Since the Russians invaded Ukraine in February, the U.S. has committed nearly $10 billion in security assistance to Ukraine.
RT News said the southern Ukrainian city of Nikolaev resorted to drastic measures to expose what the local authorities call collaborators and separatists, or people who harbor pro-Russian sentiments or help Moscow's forces in any way. It said Vitaly Kim, the head of the local military administration, placed the entire city on a two-day lockdown, announcing a prolonged curfew. During this time, residents of Nikolaev are prohibited from going outside or visiting any public places without special permits. In case of an emergency, a police escort is provided, according to Ukrainian news agency Unyan. Anna Zamaziva, the head of the Nikolaev Regional Council, said law enforcement agencies will use this time to search for collaborators and separatists. Earlier, RT News also reported that Kim had offered $100 to anyone providing information about spotters or people that Ukrainian officials believe supply target coordinates to Russian artillery and aviation.
Russia has told the U.S. it has temporarily suspended on-site inspections of its strategic nuclear weapons under an arms control treaty known as New START. The Russian Foreign Ministry said U.S. sanctions imposed on Moscow over Ukraine had changed conditions between the countries. It claimed that the U.S. was seeking advantages and had deprived Russia of the right to carry out inspections on U.S. territory. The ministry also accused the U.S. of ignoring existing realities, such as the suspension of normal air links. Hence, Russia contended that suspension of on-site inspections is allowed under the treaty terms in exceptional circumstances. The treaty, which came into force in 2011, is the last remaining arms reduction agreement between the former Cold War rivals. According to its cap, each country can deploy 1,550 long-range nuclear warheads. The suspension comes a week after U.S. President Joe Biden said he was ready to work on a new nuclear arms deal with President Vladimir Putin. The current treaty will expire in 2026.
Next up, torrential rain and severe floods kill 8 in Seoul. U.S. President Biden witnesses firsthand the flood damage in Kentucky. And the FBI raids the Florida home of former U.S. President Donald Trump. Find out more about these stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Join Miffy and friends in their adventures this August.
Miffy, a sweet little bunny. Miffy, a smart little bunny. Miffy, a cute little bunny.
Miffy returns a starfish to its home and helps Boris get rid of his hiccups. Miffy and friends then show how fun it is chasing after butterflies while they flutter freely, and how they all try to spoil the surprise for Mummy's birthday party.
Miffy, a sweet little bunny. Miffy, I think it's really funny. Miffy, it always feels sunny. With Miffy!
Saturdays at 10 a.m. dito lang sa Net 25.
Come on, boys.
This portion is brought to you by Source Alliance.
Welcome back to Mata ng Agila International. Subway stations and major roads were underwater in South Korean capital Seoul after record-breaking rains caused severe flooding. According to officials, at least 8 people are dead and 7 more are missing. Dramatic images posted on social media showed people rushing their way through waist-deep waters. Footage also showed metro stations overflowing and cars half submerged in Seoul's posh Gangnam district after torrential rain battered the city. Local reports said 3 people living in a basement apartment or banjiha died as their apartment was inundated by flood waters. President Yoon Suk-yeol ordered government officials to evacuate residents from high-risk areas and encouraged businesses to implement flexible commuting hours. The per-hour precipitation in the capital's Dongjak district also surpassed 141.5 millimeters at one point.
U.S. President Joe Biden paid a visit to the state of Kentucky, which has been ravaged by devastating floods. Biden and his wife met with families and first responders. He also had a first-hand look at the damage from flooding. The president pledged to do whatever is necessary to help. More than $3 million in federal relief has been sent to the state, along with hundreds of rescue personnel. At least 37 people have died since last month's heavy rain, and there are warnings there could be more flooding. Thunderstorms are forecast for the next 3 days.
An underwater drone will be deployed as efforts continue to rescue 10 workers trapped in a flooded coal mine in northern Mexico. The device has a high-resolution camera and light to identify possible obstacles without putting lives at risk. The military hopes that rescuers will be able to enter one of the shafts by the middle of this week if the water level drops enough. Work continues to pump water from the flooded mine at the rate of about 300 liters per second. Authorities say the miners had been doing excavation work when they hit an adjoining area full of water. 5 other workers managed to escape, but there has been no contact with the trapped miners. Several hundred soldiers and other personnel are taking part in the rescue effort, including 6 military scuba divers on standby.
The situation worsened at a fuel depot in Cuba where a fire continues to burn out of control. A 4th fuel tank is now affected after a 3rd tank collapsed in the blaze. Helicopters are scrambling to contain the fire, which broke out Friday after lightning struck the tanks. 1 person is dead and 125 are injured. About 5,000 people have been evacuated from around the disaster zone. Aircraft firefighters and other specialists from Mexico and Venezuela are helping out as the search for 16 missing firefighters continues. Health officials monitoring the air quality advise at-risk people to wear masks in smoke-affected areas and to avoid being out in the rain.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump says his Florida home has been raided by FBI agents. Trump calls it an act of prosecutorial misconduct. In a statement posted on his Truth social network, Trump writes, "These are dangerous times for our nation, as my beautiful home, Mar-a-Lago, Florida, is currently under siege, raided and occupied by a large group of FBI agents." Aerial footage of Mar-a-Lago showed police cars outside the property. The FBI raided the home to retrieve classified White House documents. Trump says it's an attack by the radical left, which does not want him to run for president in 2024. Supporters of the ex-U.S. leader were prompted to gather outside his residence and rally, waving banners with Trump's name or American flags emblazoned with his face. China's state broadcaster shows images of fresh COVID testing in its southern Hainan island, where over 80,000 tourists have been stranded in Sanya after a COVID flare-up.
483 COVID cases were reported in Sanya, a popular surfing city of more than 1 million people. Tourists who want to leave the island must test negative in 5 PCR tests over 7 days, according to health authorities. China is the only major economy still holding fast to a zero COVID strategy, as snap lockdowns and long quarantines batter local tourism. The country's borders have also remained largely closed since early 2020, halting international tourism. Authorities order that all entertainment venues, including spas, karaoke bars, and pubs, be closed. However, essential services such as supermarkets and pharmacies remain open.
Faced with limited vaccines for monkeypox, the state of Maryland is setting in motion an aggressive response to the outbreak. Arlene Ocampo reports.
The Maryland Department of Health, or MDH, issues an update on the state's response to the human monkeypox outbreak. This includes efforts to make testing, vaccination, and public health resources widely available for high-risk populations. Governor Larry Hogan says since before the state's first monkeypox case was identified, Maryland has been mounting an aggressive response to the outbreak in coordination with local and regional partners. Hogan adds while vaccine supply from the federal government is severely limited at this time, anyone who believes that they may need testing or treatment should contact their healthcare provider or local health department immediately. MDH emphasizes that the goal is limiting the spread of the virus and vaccinating those who may have been exposed in the prior 2 weeks. The state says it will expand access to the vaccine as more supplies become available. Arlene Ocampo, Fort Washington, Maryland, Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The state of Nevada in the U.S. seeks to secure $38 million in federal funds to boost its electric vehicle charging support and network. To tell us more, here's Anna Cui in Las Vegas.
Nevada recently submitted a comprehensive plan to the U.S. Joint Office of Energy and Transportation to secure $38 million in federal funds to boost the state's electric vehicle charging infrastructure. The future of transportation in Nevada is electric, said by Governor Steve Sisolak. He feels it's an important part of the fight against climate change. Once funding gets approved, the Nevada Department of Transportation will receive more than $38 million over the next 5 years through the bipartisan infrastructure law. That's allowing the state to expand on the existing Nevada Electric Highway program. Now, phase 1 of that plan has since been completed, which was to build EV charging infrastructure along U.S. Highway 95. This plan also included the Regional Electric Vehicle Plan for the West, or what they're calling REV West. The governors from the states signed an agreement to establish a framework for creating an Intermountain West EV corridor network. And the hope for that is to lessen range anxiety. So when people are driving out, even just across the West, they'd feel better knowing that there are charging stations along the way. But the goal of local officials, with this plan is not only to build EV charging stations along highways, but also around the city. Nowadays, we see many charging stations at the malls, gas stations, even at the different hotel properties here in Las Vegas. More charging stations could encourage more people to switch to electric cars, thereby reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's a vital part in Nevada's overall fight against climate change, as well as the state's plan for cleaner energy, better air quality, and maintaining sustainability. Now, to date, the region of Las Vegas in southern Nevada has 807 public EV charging stations, 135 of which are free, according to PlugShare.com. Anna Cui, Las Vegas, Nevada, Matanang Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Australian airline Qantas has asked senior executives to work as baggage handlers for 3 months as it tries to tackle an acute labor shortage. The managers and executives were asked to work in the baggage handling roles for 3 or 5 days in a week in shifts of either 4 or 6 hours a day per shift. Duties include loading and unloading bags, as well as driving vehicles to move luggage around airports. Qantas head of operations said the volunteers would work at Melbourne and Sydney airports. As borders reopen, Qantas cited high levels of winter flu, COVID spike, and ongoing tight labor market as its challenges in resuming its services. Google was briefly down on Tuesday, with users in the US, UK, Australia, Singapore, and elsewhere reporting issues with the search engine. At its peak in the US, more than 40,000 people reported that the website was not working. Then the figure swiftly fell and has stayed below 100 since 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Downdetector.com confirmed that Google was indeed having problems. Google said in a statement that it is aware of a software update issue and scavenging bear trapped in car overnight. Mata ng Agila International will return after this short break.
Tulad ko, kayo ba ay laging nag-a-add to cart? Palagi ka rin bang may reminder na 0808 o payday sale? Magmula ng pandemic, marami sa atin ang biglang namulat sa mundo ng online shopping o e-commerce. What's behind enabling an e-commerce for brands and retailers? How do we manage it efficiently? Let us find out about the world of e-commerce. Sa pagkakataong ito, makakasama at kakausapin natin ang isang e-commerce enabler, Mr. Steve C., the founder and CEO of Great Deals.
In terms of converting people to buy online, there's a lot of complexity. Like what kind of content, what kind of digital image will you show? How do you manage your shop? How do you activate yung mga digital consumers natin that will convert them to buying your products? So all of these things are important. Filipino buying online is still at its nascent stage. Bagong-bago pa lang. So there's a lot of opportunity for people, to grow their online business.
Open for Business with Cesar Vallejos, Sunday, 9 p.m.
Kung kayo ay may sumbong o reklamo na gusto po ninyong paaksyonan sa inyong lugar, problema na nais niyo pong masolusyonan, mag-text sa 0915-415-1035 o mag-email sa responde@net25.com. Pwede rin kayong magpadala ng mensahe sa ating Facebook page at Net25TV. Hintayin po namin ang inyong mensahe para agad na marespondihan. Mapapanood nyo kami sa mga sumusunod na mga channels. Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Ito ang Responde, Mata ng Mamamayan.
Iranian satellite launched by Russia blasted off from Kazakhstan and went into orbit amid controversy that Moscow might use it to improve its surveillance of military targets in Ukraine. A live feed from Russian space agency Roscosmos showed the launch of the Soyuz 2.1B rocket carrying the Kayam satellite. The Russian mission control confirmed its subsequent entry into orbit. Iran has sought to deflect suspicions that Moscow could use Kayam to spy on Ukraine. The Iranian space agency clarified that the Islamic Republic would control the Kayam satellite from day one. It said no third country is able to access the information sent by the satellite due to its encrypted algorithm. The purpose of Kayam is to monitor the country's borders, enhance agricultural productivity, and monitor water resources and natural disasters, according to the space agency. Kayam is not the first Iranian satellite Russia has launched into space. In 2005, Iran's Sina-1 satellite was deployed from Russia's Plesetsk Cosmodrome.
Amazon announced a $1.7 billion deal to buy the maker of robotic vacuum Roomba in a merger that would play into the tech giant's artificial intelligence and smart home ambitions. Amazon said in a release that US-based iRobot is a global company that builds robots and intelligent home innovations. It has introduced Roomba self-operating vacuums a decade ago. Amazon Senior Vice President of Devices Dave Limp said over many years, the iRobot team has proven its ability to reinvent how people clean with their products that are incredibly practical and inventive. Amazon's deal to buy iRobot for $61 per share, along with acquiring the company's debt, is subject to approval of shareholders and regulators. The acquisition reinforces Amazon's interest and market position in robotics and home automation and underscores the strategic value of AI, according to Bayard analyst Colin Sebastian in a note to investors. Amazon has been investing in smart home and automation technologies with acquisitions such as Ring doorbells, Kiva warehouse robots, and self-driving startup Zoox.
Three of the four top finishers on the 9th and final day of the 2022 Vans US Open of Surfing in Huntington Beach, California are from Hawaii. And the youngest, only 17, Alan and Eva Basalyahe with the story.
It's the final day of the Vans US Open of Surfing.
Soils are surging as it's a level of competition at this year's event.
There's no feeling like winning, really. That's why we're all here, because winning is so special, and it doesn't usually happen as often because everyone's super good. But yeah, the moment is big. Surfing and their fans is what makes the sport big, and super thankful that we do have fans that do love watching surfing, and yeah, it's huge.
The heat was going back and forth, and I knew it would, going into it. Draw was such a great surfer, and he's putting up big numbers all week, so I just knew I had to be real smart out there and be on the right waves. And towards the middle of the heat, he went on a wave that I kind of knew wasn't going to better his situation, and right after that, I got my, the highest score of the heat was just 6.9, and I felt like that was the turning point in the heat, and I really just had to manage him after that. This is my first finals day ever here at the US Open, so, I've always watched it on the internet, like, wow, look at that crowd, all the people on the pier and on the beach. It looks like a stadium, and I love that stadium atmosphere. I feel like brings the best out of me, so I was really stoked.
Today was probably one of the best days for competition, just the conditions itself. Like, it's been so windy and so big and choppy, and today was just like total opposite, nice and glassy and like perfect. It always comes down to like the last 5 minutes. Like, sometimes if you're in a good spot and you've secured your place, like, you just want time to pass and you want the ocean to go flat, and it was kind of doing that, and that's when it like comes surreal. It's just like, whoa, and then once that horn goes off, you're just like in shock. I'm still kind of in shock. It hasn't sunk in yet. You want to put on a good show for the fans, that's why they're here, and especially when you're alongside like all the heavy hitters in the shortboarder division too, it just like, it drives you more to take the win and just have a good time.
This is definitely our biggest fan event of the year. We get the most people on the beach for sure, and I haven't competed here since 2008. So for me, it's great to be back and to see all the fans and get to interact again after COVID and everything. And yeah, it's just beautiful. I've been doing this for a long time. I'm one of the elder statesmen, I guess. The kids are really taking it to a whole new level. You can see by the final was mostly young kids. They're just taking it to a new place, and I'm stoked to see it, and I'm stoked to still be here kind of fighting for them for it, and they haven't pushed me out yet. But yeah, it's great. The level of surfing's really risen a lot over the last few years, and it's great to see it continue to do so.
The pros shared their reasons for surfing, as well as thoughts on how the water can be beneficial to everyone.
I surf because it's fun and my whole family does it. And honestly, that's why a majority of us do surf, because it is fun and it's a great way to connect with the ocean. So if you want to get out there, I highly recommend it.
I encourage everyone to try surfing at least once in your life. It's the most incredible feeling ever. And if you're not surfing, just get out in the ocean and enjoy it. It's good for you.
Whether you surf or don't surf, just get in the water, swim, go to the beach. Just enjoy life, man. Nature's a beautiful thing.
Nothing says summer in California quite like surfing at the beach. Whether catching the perfect wave
or soaking in the sun for that perfect tan, the Vans US Open of Surfing didn't disappoint fans looking to ride the wave of fun in the sun.
Even Allen, Huntington Beach, California. Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Singer Olivia Newton-John, whose songs topped the pop music charts in the 70s and the 80s, has died after a 3-decade-long battle with cancer. She was 73. Newton-John passed away peacefully at her Southern California ranch Monday morning. She was surrounded by family and friends. No cause of death was given in a statement from the family. Fans placed flowers on her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. The British-born and Australian-raised entertainer dedicated a number of albums and concerts to raise funds for cancer research. Newton-John was best known for starring in the 1978 musical Grease alongside John Travolta. Despite her cancer diagnosis, she performed into her late 60s, including a 2-year stint in Las Vegas.
Britney Spears is to return to the music scene with a collaboration with Elton John. It has been confirmed. Take a look. Though few details are known about the new track called Hold Me Closer, a spokesperson has told the press that more information is expected in the coming week. It is the first new music from the brave new girl pop star since she was freed from a 13-year conservatorship. Now teasing the collaboration, Elton shared a picture of a rose and rocket emoji on Instagram alongside the words, "Hold me closer." The announcement comes after Spears recently married Sam Asghari in an intimate ceremony in California last month.
Japanese fashion designer Issey Miyake, whose global career spanned more than half a century, has died aged 84. An employee at his office in Tokyo has confirmed. The employee said over the telephone to AFP News that Miyake died on the evening of August 5. However, she did not give further details of Miyake's death, and she also declined to be named. Miyake's funeral had already taken place, with only relatives participating in line with his wishes, and there were no plans for a public ceremony. Separately, public broadcaster NHK and other Japanese media reported the news of his passing, with the Asahi Shimbun newspaper and other outlets saying he had died of liver cancer. Miyake, who pioneered high-tech, comfortable clothing, was part of a wave of young Japanese designers who made their mark in Paris in the mid-1970s. His fashion house nurtured many talented young designers and was known for innovative and dazzling catwalk shows. Among his inventions was the Pleats Please line. He also made more than 100 black turtlenecks for Apple co-founder Steve Jobs. Born in Hiroshima in 1938, he was 7 years old when the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the city in August of 1945.
Let us now head over to a lovely Maryland town in the U.S. where a hidden gem delights locals who wish to take a breather away from the bustling streets of neighboring cities. Estella Dominique with this sunny report.
Just an hour drive from the nation's capital, one will find a patch of land covered in beautiful sunflowers within the McKee-Beshers Wildlife Management Area in Postville, Maryland. Soaking up the noonday sun, these tall-stemmed, bright yellow beauties stand facing the sky and shoulder to shoulder with local admirers. The area also provides habitat for upland and forest wildlife species, including white-tailed deer, wild turkeys, squirrels, songbirds, and waterfowl. Estella Dominique, Poolesville, Maryland, Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
A black bear looking for food found itself trapped in a car overnight. This happened in the northern U.S. state of Montana. About 11 o'clock at night, the bear had successfully opened the door of the car and climbed in. But once inside, the animal couldn't figure out how to open the door again. The critter spent about 8 hours in the car. The car's owner, Mike Pilati, called the local sheriff, but he was told it would be the next day before wildlife officials could come out to take care of the problem. Pilati didn't want to wait that long, so the next morning, he gingerly opened the car door with a stick and the bear came roaring out. The unwanted guest did a lot of damage: a shattered windshield, 2 dashboard, and mangled passenger door. The worst, said Pilati, was the smell. He says bears are stinky creatures. It's a problem now for the insurance adjusters to deal with.
Now, here are some of the major historical events that happened on this day. In 1859, Otis Tufts patented the first true passenger elevator in the U.S. His invention impressed spectators at the convention, and the first passenger elevator was installed in New York City in 1856. In 1945, the U.S. dropped a second atomic bomb on Japan, destroying the city of Nagasaki and resulting in Japan's unconditional surrender. Nicknamed Fat Man, the plutonium bomb detonated at 11:02 local time and killed 40,000 people instantly. Historians have long debated whether the United States was justified in using the A-bomb, with some believing it only did so to show the strength of its nuclear arsenal and ensure its supremacy in the global power hierarchy. And in 1963, Whitney Houston was born in Newark, New Jersey. Houston was one of the best-selling musical performers of the 80s and 90s. Her debut album alone yielded 3 #1 singles in the U.S., namely Greatest Love of All, Saving All My Love for You, and How Will I Know. Houston's motion picture debut in The Bodyguard featured her rendition of Dolly Parton's I Will Always Love You, which stayed at #1 for 14 weeks.
And before we end tonight's broadcast, here's a quote from American astronomer Maria Mitchell. There is no cosmetic for beauty like happiness.
The energy you have inside, it just radiates when you're
that's true.
happy.
Makeup or no makeup?
I know. I love it when they say, "Oy, glowing ka."
Glowing ka. Kaya yun.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I'm CJ Hero.
And I'm Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.